Hello, my name is Kana Ezaki. Today I will talk about linguistic landscape in Asakusa. This is my outline today. First, introduction, literature review, and then I will describe my research question and then my hypothesis of the research question and then methodology, and I will show some results and examples and discussion and references. I chose Asakusa to research linguistic landscape, as I said. Why I chose Asakusa is I have two reasons. The first is there are many non-Japanese users for sightseeing, like international people from abroad. Please take a look at the table on the left. This is a rate of international tourists to total tourists in 2019. In Tokyo as a whole, the rate was 3%. On the other hand, in Asakusa, the rate was 17%. So the international tourists is very large in Asakusa. And next, please look at the graph on the right side. It represents the transition in the number of Japanese tourists and the number of international tourists. In 2019, I mean before COVID, the number of tourists were here. On the other hand, in 2020, after COVID, it decreased sharply and here. But I think the number of tourists of both Japanese and international will be recovered over a long period of time. And the other reason I chose Asakusa is that there is a famous temple and traditional stores along the street. Please look at the picture. This is Sosenji temple. It's a famous famous temple in Asakusa. And there are a lot of old stores along near the temple. So I think it will be interesting to research Asakusa because Asakusa has interesting features. Now, let's move on to the literature review. I have 4 literatures here. And the first one is MacGregor. She researched science in Seijo, Tokyo. She focused on multilingual science there. And the second is Backhouse in 2006. He researched the stations of the Yamanose line, and he focused on multilingualism, especially translations. And the third is O'Neill. He gave a presentation in my class, and he researched their science in Tokyo. And the last one is Ray. His research was about translations in multilingual science, and he defined it, the types of translations, and there are four types of translations: duplicating, fragmentary, overlapping, and complementary. And then I will talk about it later. So this is my research question. What are the characteristics of Asakusa's multilingual science and Japanese-only science? This is my hypothesis to answer my research question. I have three hypotheses, and the first is about language. In my hypothesis, the number of multilingual signs is greater than that of monolingual Japanese signs. That's because there are a lot of international people in Asakusa, so the signs are easy for them to read, I think. And the second hypothesis is about translation. I think the number of duplicating translation is greater than other types of translations. As I said before, a lot of non-Japanese users read the sign, so the translations are need to be translated completely. And the third hypothesis is about Japanese signs. I think the number of signs emphasize tradition is greater than the number of modern signs. Asakusa is a traditional city, and there are a lot of old stores there, so the signs are traditional, I guess. So let's move on to methodology. To research Asakusa, I visited Asakusa, and then I took pictures of signs. I took about 130 pictures there, and then I coded the pictures. About language, I divided multilingual or monolingual Japanese signs, and then multilingual signs are divided by translations, duplicating or other types of translations. And monolingual Japanese signs were coded traditional or modern ones. And then I'm gonna show you some results and some examples from now on. And first, my hypothesis 1 about language was correct. The number of multilingual signs are a little bit greater than that of monolingual Japanese signs. In the table, the rate of multilingual signs was 48.3%, but monolingual Japanese signs were 44 to 3%. The gap was a little bit, but the number of multilingual signs are greater. And here is some examples of multilingual signs. A lot of the name of a lot of signs are multilingual, especially names of the store. Like this. This is Japanese, and this is English, and then this is Japanese, and this is English. Next, I'm going to talk about second result. My hypothesis 2, that is about translation, was not correct. The number of duplicating translations are smaller than other translations. In this table, the rate of duplicating translation was 33 to 7%. On the other hand, fragmentary, overlapping, and complementary signs are 66 to 0.3%. So a lot of multilingual signs were not completely translated. I was surprised the result actually. And this is some examples of multilingual signs. On the left side, there are Japanese and English. When I first looked at this sign, I thought it was duplicating translation, but on the top, Asakusa name, it's only in Japanese, and also this price was only in English. And also on the right side sign, there are 3 languages: Japanese, English, and Chinese. It also looks like a duplicating translation, but it's actually fragmentary translation. The title of the sign is only in Japanese, and Ippon, this is only in Japanese too. So this is the third result. My hypothesis 3 about Japanese signs was correct. The number of traditional signs are greater than modern signs. The rate of traditional signs is 51.3%, and modern signs was 38.5%. The gap is larger than I expected. And these are examples of traditional signs. On the left side, the font is calligraphic like handwriting, and on the right side, the font is just modern, but the design is Japanese traditional one, like stripe, the color black orange and green. This is like Japanese traditional ones. I think it's like kabuki style. And next, I'm gonna show you some exceptional examples here. This is multilingual but traditional signs. On the left side, the sign has Japanese and English. It's multilingual, but the design is Japanese style and like font, and the lantern, this and this, or it's called chochin. It's a Japanese traditional lantern. So the sign emphasizes Japanese tradition. Also, on the right side, it's small, but the sign has Japanese and English. It's multilingual, but on the top, it says oshinagaki. It means menu, but usually it says menu in katakana, but it says oshinagaki on purpose. It's a word that old people used. So I interviewed the owner of this shop. The first question was, when was your shop opened? And he said in 2019. I was surprised because the shop was newer than I had expected. And the second question was, why did you choose Asakusa? And he said, because many international people came to Asakusa. And the last question was, what is your favorite point of the sign? And he said, the sign includes English. That's because a lot of international people read it, I think. And the logo is like Japanese common. Let's look at this slide. This logo is like common, he said. Common looks like this. Common means like Japanese family emblem. And they were used over 1,000 years. But it is not used recently, but it's traditional Japanese traditional sign. So let's so in conclusion, I have four my opinion here. The first is as a result, the number of multilingual signs are a little bit greater than the number of monolingual Japanese signs. I think the reason is that most of stores are for non-Japanese users. So the signs are easy for them to read, I think. And the second result was the translations are not completely there are not many duplicating translations, but there are a lot of other translations. I think that's because main readers of the sign are Japanese people. In Asakusa, there are 70% of uh, of 70% of international tourists. It's large relatively, but it's just 70%, even before COVID. So a lot of signs are for Japanese people, but for non-Japanese users, there are multilingual signs, but the translations is not completely, I think. And the third was about traditional signs. The number of traditional signs are greater than the modern signs. But I was surprised that that is not only old stores, but also new stores. Just as the stores I interviewed, that's because a lot of stores, including new stores, want to match Asakusa atmosphere, Japanese traditional atmosphere. And the last one is there is an exceptional signs. They are multilingual but traditional signs. I think the signs have two purposes. One is to inform international people, I mean non-Japanese users, of the menu or something, and the other is to match atmosphere in Asakusa. This is references, and this is all for my presentation. Thank you for listening.